See, it is 5:30, so I will call this meeting to order. July 25th, 2024, meeting with the Community Preservation Committee. First, I want to welcome our two new members, Lisa Riley, welcome to CPC, and welcome back, and the Tubin.
Thank you.
Our,
Give him like a hot pen.
our first order of business is the reorganization. We know that, Shelley has, relinquished his spot on any of the committees in town, so that we have an open on the board. He was the chairman of the board, so. That, chair is now vacant, so I open it to the, committee.
I'd like to put forward Ed Bradley as chair.
Second?
Wait, you want to pick out the nominations and then,
Yeah,
Well, we have to second his.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
other nominations?
Are there any other nominations? If not, we will take a vote.
Take a vote.
Yeah,
All right. How do you vote?
I am last.
Okay. Karen, how do you vote?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Betty, how do you vote?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes,
Myself, yes. John?
Yes,
Lisa?
Yes.
And Michael?
yes,
Okay.
And Tim.
And then.
You already asked.
We did?
Right.
Yes.
second,
So then,
because my big head is in the way.
Being appointed as the chair, that leaves the vice chair open at this time.
I'd like to make a nomination for Tim Grandy for vice chair.
Mr. Grandy for vice chair, second.
Second.
Any other nominations? Hey, if not, Lenny, you can take a vote.
all right, do it again. Karen?
Sure.
Betty?
Yes.
Myself, yes. John?
yes,
Lisa?
Yes.
Michael?
Yeah.
Ed?
Yes.
And Kim?
Abstain.
Okay. Passed unanimous, or not unanimous.
It's one of abstention.
Or one abstention.
Our next order, on the agenda was the adopted minutes from the June 27th meeting. Unfortunately, we don't have a copy of that here, so we will put that, on to our next meeting to, look and adopt those minutes. And now, the next item is public comment. Is there anyone that wants to make public comment to the committee? Is there, some press on tonight? Should we get that announcement? or-
There's a phone number there,
Okay,
so I'm not sure.
Yeah, there doesn't appear to be any hands raised.
Is there anyone from the press at the meeting this evening?
well, typically there is, and someone may dial in, so, the notice is to everybody in the committee that it's probably gonna be recorded by someone in the press. And the people in the audience, and any of your comments could be recorded and, by then. So we've got that covered. Next order of business, the finance department, Lynn Barrett.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to go over some financial information with the committee prior to your discussion of your applications. There's a few things that I wanted to, and I apologize for not sending things in advance. We have been working on the close, and up until yesterday afternoon, we were still making changes. So this is, the numbers that I'm gonna give you are a draft. They're subject to change, but not subject to change very significantly. It would be very, very small adjustments, I would say. So the first form that I'm gonna hand out to everyone here, and Betty, I apologize, I can email you the forms after, the meeting.
That's okay. Yep.
but I'm gonna hand this out, John, if you just take one. So this form right here is a required form. Every year we file it with the Department of Revenue, and it gives the fiscal year update for the Community Preservation Fund. And we just have to report to them what your revenues were, what the expenditures were, and it's in summary, it's not in detail. The detail we can provide to you in a separate format, but this is just the form. This is called a CP2 form that gets filed, and so it just shows the beginning of your fund balance. It goes through all the different various revenue items, the collections from the surcharge that goes on the taxes, the match from the state, earnings on investment, because we invest the CPA money and we earn interest. And then we had a grant reimbursement, which was the Seaside Trail. Thank you, David. That was one of the DEE projects, and they submitted for reimbursement and got $100,000 from the state on that project. So because we spent it out of CPC funds, that reimbursement comes back to CPC. And then the expenditures, it just gives in total what we spent on open space, historic resources, community housing, and other includes recreation. And then we give a total of what we spent on administrative expenses, and then a fund balance at the end of the year, which is 4.3 million. On the back page of this form, then sort of delineates what that fund balance is made up of, and part of it is reserved for encumbrances. So there are projects that have been things that have been contracted out, and that fund balance is reserved for those items. That's 1.7. We have reserves, the set aside. So we have 9,982.21 in the historic set aside, and we have 702,731 in the community housing reserve. Those balances are as of June 30th. At the annual town meeting in April, we voted to use a portion of that reserve, the housing reserve, on the Megro project on Fort Street. So some of that money has been used. I have that number somewhere else. I can tell you what that was. 587,000 that we used out of the reserve. So there is some little bit of money left there.
How much was it?
I think it was 587. We used a combination of annual revenues and money in the housing reserve for that project.
So that's the one that's going back, correct, the fall town meeting, because of the inaccurate data, so.
Yes.
So no money has really been expended yet, because we're gonna.
No, we haven't contracted, we haven't done anything. That one's
Right.
just sitting in abeyance until we go back to town meeting and basically reaffirm the vote.
With accurate data.
Yeah.
So before, that vote was not a super majority, it was not 2/3. It was only a majority because we didn't have to borrow, and that still exists, correct?
That's correct. Yep. Okay, and then, let's see, fund balance reserved for special purposes, so that the rest of that is money that hasn't been it's set aside for projects that have been voted in the past, but it's not encumbered into a contract. So basically, the 1.7 up above and the 1.2 represent balances of projects of monies that are sitting that are going to be expended at some future date. And then the undesignated fund balance is 642,000. So that portion of money is available to use for any future projects.
That's kind of cash on hand.
Yes, yeah.
That's about borrowing.
Right, 642,000 is in the undesignated fund balance.
Correct.
Okay, so that's the CP2 form. Let's see. The other thing that I'm gonna hand out, this is something that we update every year. John, just take one, pass it around. So this is the, sort of annual revenues, what's budgeted, to come in, what we have, allocated or spent, and, what the future looks like for future revenues. I've also included on this spreadsheet, everything that we have voted at town meeting in the past as an authorization to borrow. And any remaining borrowing balances are sitting sort of out there. So there's one, two, three, four, about 5 projects that are authorizations to borrow from town meeting. Some of those projects are, for example, Stevens Field. Stevens Field is just about finished. I believe they're gonna have an opening ceremony, I think August 2nd, or grand opening or something like that. They're gonna unlock the doors so people can go in. So that project's winding down. We did borrow temporarily this 1.8 million that you see on the right-hand side down in the right-hand corner there. We borrowed that temporarily just so that we can finish the project, pay bills. And then it's due, in 2025 with a small interest payment that we have to pay. And then, the expectation would be sort of with the annual revenues for fiscal 26, that we would start to set aside some of the 26 revenues, just try to pay that down instead of having to borrow long-term. These other projects, Jenny Pond has started, initially with some design and engineering money that David needed. So we did borrow, I think it was like $73,000, short term so that we could pay those invoices. So that project has sort of started. I mean, David can probably give you more information on timeline with regards to, when the rest of that money would be needed, but I do believe it's sometime this fiscal year, right?
The dredging and the footbridge, should go up there in the next few weeks, and we'll do that one this fall.
Okay,
So, yes, so the total budget for Jenny Pond is $2.2 million.
that's correct. So 2.2 million, David has applied for a grant of 1.1, status of grant, David.
So it's part of the 10 million.
Okay, so it's
We
part
have
of,
that.
We have the 1.1 million.
okay, so we would use, sometimes we use grant money first before we have to borrow on our own, but we would definitely probably have to borrow something by the end of the fiscal year to cover any expenditures that we make out of the 1.1, in fiscal 25. As far as the other 3 projects, I'll just speak, briefly about the Coalition for the Homeless and the Grantham Group. I reached out to both. We do not have grant agreements with these groups yet. Council and myself will be working with those groups to determine grant agreements and what the payment schedules are going to be. Both groups have said that they would anticipate some kind of withdrawal or payment of money, this fiscal year. But that remains to be determined, hasn't been set in stone yet. In the discussions with Grantham, we talked about maybe pushing it off until fiscal 26. Coalition, maybe next winter, spring. But again, those agreements haven't even gotten started yet, so we're working on those. And nothing would be, sent to them until we have a signed agreement with them and, a payment schedule and how that would work. Yeah.
So the Grantham Group, they have not agree to, putting it off to 26? Because they haven't gotten anything yet? Or do they know about, a little bit about it verbally?
So I had email conversations with, the Grantham group, individuals, the Walter O'Hanian, I think is his name.
Right,
And I think we pushed it off until about like August of next year, so that would be fiscal 26.
and they were amiable about that.
Yeah, no, they
Okay.
definitely wanna work with us,
Okay.
you know, yeah.
Well, that was how they got the grant, I would know.
Yeah.
Mr. Randy,
I got a question. When you go down through your chart here on interest. 2026, 27, 28, 29. Incrementally, it increases. Is this interest we're paying on borrowed money?
Yeah, so the only interest amount that we have in there is an amount that we budgeted for fiscal 25. We don't have any amounts in the future years because we have not decided or voted on anything yet.
So it's 156, 161, 166, and 171.
That's the operating budget. That's the 4% admin budget.
Okay.
Underneath it is the zeros. It's like.
So what are we spending in interest currently on borrowed money?
So the only thing that we've borrowed is. John, if you could hand this one out. So we budgeted 113,000 for anticipated interest expense associated with Stevens Field and this, Jenny Pond that we did for the two projects that are in the works ongoing right now. You'll see in this memo, I am actually recommending to the committee that we reduce the 142 down to 56,747, because for the two notes that we took out, the Stevens Field project, the note, it had an interest payment of 63,000, but we received a premium, so the net that we owe on that will be 54,568. And then the Jenny Pond, we borrowed $73,010. The interest payment is 2,552. We got a premium of 373. So what we owe is 2,179. So that 56,747 would be in the budget, and that would be paid next April of 25. So we'd go back to town meeting in the fall and just do a budget amendment to decrease 113,142 down to 56,747.
Hopefully pay that off the year after.
And then the year after, exactly, we probably have to roll it a little bit because the anticipated revenues for fiscal 26 don't actually start coming in until fiscal 26. So we would have another small interest payment. We can roll, this particular one is due in April, and we can roll it for like 3 or 4 months so that it's due in July and we just pay it off in July with the new fiscal 26 revenues.
Probably a stupid question, but I always believe any question not asked is a stupid question, right? So where does this interest go to? Who is receiving it? Is it the state or is it?
We borrow it from I'm gonna say a bank. So we go out to bid on the bands. I think we got at least 6 bids from different investment companies. They bid on it and then we award it to the lowest net interest cost.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Right,
Who pays the interest? The
yeah.
CPA, or does the come out of the general town budget?
Nope, because that is CPA debt service budget.
Yeah.
Cause it's CPA debt.
and then the premium comes in afterwards.
The premium came in, when we go out to borrow, we receive the premium. So the premium is actually sitting in the CPA fund right now. The premium we received is 9,717.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
So that'll sit in the bank until April, until we use it. So we'll earn interest on it. You know what I mean? It's.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How much interest are we earning on it?
That's in the other one.
Our assets, I mean, I see something here, investment earnings at 14.4.
No,
That's a
that's
match.
the match from the state.
Okay.
That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
We are 14.5%, yeah.
Used to be a lot higher too. when
It's $25,000. It looks like it's about.
So we earned, in the report that I gave you, we earned $336,671 on
Okay,
CPA funds for fiscal 24.
and you don't know what that interest rate
So
is?
we invest in all, like, we have money market, CDs, you know, we have a cash manager who sort of moves the money around and tries to get the highest interest rate. So we've got different money markets and, I mean, things that are like 4.5%, 5%.
Sure.
We've done pretty good, you know, in
Okay.
that area. We can't invest CPA money in like stocks or bonds or anything like.
Yeah, that would
You could
be.
lose it all.
Yeah, we have, we can do our other like stabilization funds.
But at least someone's looking at it,
Yeah.
'cause I've been on other boards that they haven't really
Yeah,
looked
no,
at
we,
what.
she's out there getting the best interest rate that we can possibly get.
A lot of money we're dealing with, so. not like-
Exactly, exactly.
You hit 5%, you're pretty good.
Yeah, so, good questions, yeah,
Thank you.
okay.
So then what do we have available for this next town meeting that we're based on?
So, this would be, well, this is what I would say, so. You can always authorize to borrow, but you've got a lot of borrowing sort of sitting on the books here that we need to address in the future years.
What's the total of borrowing?
So we have outstanding about 13 million.
13,029,000.
So,
How long does that take to pay off?
so it all really depends. It depends on, you can borrow temporarily for up to 2 years before you have to start paying principal. So you would incur like a short-term interest payment, which is going to happen because we only, you know, we have annual revenues. You look in fiscal 26 of about 3.9 million. 10% of that, you know, has to be spent on open space, 10% on historic, 10% on housing. So we can use the 10% to pay. So when you incur debt service for like open space and recreation, that is considered part of your 10% for open space and recreation. So so there's ways that we can, you know, make it work kind of thing. And depending on the cash flow that's needed for these projects, I would be recommending to use of that 3.9 million, so much towards the Red Brooks, so much towards the coalition, so much towards Stevens Field. So it really depends on what the cash flow needs are this fiscal year to what we're gonna incur for debt next year. But these are the only revenues that you have available, like about 3.9, 4 million, it's about 4 million a year.
So in your experiences, I haven't been on in a while, is 13 million normally what's being carried or?
Not normal for CPA, we usually, it's high, we usually have a couple of projects that are going on, like we did this courthouse building was $5 million, we did, when we purchased, Center Hill Preserve down there, I mean, that was many years ago, but that was a borrowing. So we've done it in the past, it's just this is much higher than normal.
So I know in the past, when I was on it, you know, we'd come to a town meeting and we'd focus more on paying debt down and
Right.
only articles that, you know, need to be, like, that are time sensitive, like if we don't do it. we're gonna
Right,
lose
so
out.
it might be time to start buying down some debt.
Yeah, the actual cash that's available right now, like you said, is that 600?
620, yeah. or 640.
That's all we really have right this minute. That
It's $642,000.
Yeah, and I wouldn't recommend using all of it, because that's really just your cushion. So in the projects, so it really depends on what you guys want to do and what I would recommend how we do that.
Can I ask you just one question, Apple?
Oh, okay, then.
So do you have any idea if other communities run their CPA with such a debt load?
I don't. I mean, I could have Chelsea research with the coalition to see if they have some data and information
I
on
mean, we
that.
basically, as I said when I was standing before the select board, it's like we have a credit card and we now have this large credit balance. And the interest rate is a significant part of the CPA fund. We're talking $4 million a year we get as income. I mean, we've got 4 or 5 years, we've got at least 3.5 years worth of money already spent. And now we're gonna spend more, and we're gonna spend more. And I understand we wanna do these projects. But, you know, and we wanna solve problems like housing and all this other stuff.
Well, but this would be good discussion when we get to those.
When we get to those,
No, I'm not talking about those, I'm just talking in general about a philosophy of how we fund these projects, and right now, I believe we're funding these projects with debt, not with revenue. Because we've now committed it, if you wanted to just do it in simple math, we have $600,000, that's what we have for the next 3 or 4 years.
and also not recommending spending all of it.
Right. So the question is that, it's just a question, I'm not passing judgment or anything, is that good fiscal policy? Is that something we want to do as a committee? Is that something we want to do as a town? I think those are questions we should ask ourselves as we go and look at some of the things that are before us that we're asking again, spend some money. You know, and then we come into these situations where we allocate money to things like Stevens Field, and then it either ends up being more, maybe in good cases it's less. But there's just all these things, and I don't have the answer. I'm just looking at the numbers and trying to wrap my head around it and say, what should our policy be, and how should we be spending money? And if it's just to borrow, that's what we should do, but I'm not in favor of that.
John, and then Lisa.
Sorry, I just had a quick question for Lynn, but to your question earlier, Len, or your statement earlier, and Michael was talking about, I do know there were stretches in the past where the committee really didn't carry any debt for years at a time, Len. There would be multitude of projects that were pretty much paid off. You know, with the current revenue levels that may have been built up. You know, there was a surplus, maybe minimal things were done in the prior fiscal year, combined with the fiscal year that we were in, and we were able to do some things. But then, you know, what happens is, there's sometimes you get to that bottleneck, and there's a multitude of projects that, you know, make sense, and, you know, the committee moves forward with. And I lost my train of thought, but anywho, all right, we'll just move on to the question. So my question was,
Oh, yeah.
we owe 100 on the Spire?
No,
Okay,
no. So what happened with the Spire, we worked very closely with Bob Hollis on the cash flow needed for that project. And if you remember, town meeting voted $3.6 million. We used $3 million of available funds for that project. We authorized to borrow $600,000. And we paid down $500,000 of that at the special town meeting in the spring.
Right.
Because he said that that project came in under budget, and they were only going to spend around $3.5 million. So we don't anticipate having to borrow that $100,000, and we'll probably end up rescinding it at town meeting.
Lisa.
Okay, so I have a question, again, being new, but with the money that we have been granted, we have to do 10% and have we met all those thresholds?
Yes.
With all of
Yes.
them? So anything moving forward is,
Yeah, on an annual basis, you have to determine those,
Right.
you have to meet those 10% thresholds, and we have.
okay,
We have for fiscal 25 already, so that's.
And the other 70% can be used for all of the above on the 3.
right.
Oh, yeah,
is it 70 or is it 66? Because we have 4 for admin. I don't want to.
yeah.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
No, I do, and we have debt service and we have administrative budget, so
Potato.
it's a
So you
little.
could do all of it
Same thing.
for housing if you chose to, because you've already
No.
let the.
No, not
Capital
100%.
let
It's
it.
66.
No.
Good.
Right, of that balance, yes.
66, so if you wanted to, okay.
But
I'm of the ilk of buying down the debt. I don't think you should be operating kind of like business here, even though you do have opportunities that you may have to do some borrowing. I'm not real currently looking, seeing these figures, and listening to the conversation. That we need to buy this down or something. Not take on any more borrowing. A lot of work to do to convince me to take on any more borrowing that we don't already have here in this equation. So that's my opinion currently.
Mr. Tubin, just, I guess somewhat like a point, what I think, if I remember, doesn't, Lynn provides all the financials where we are, what we have. And then we just start discussing articles and we decide
Yes,
what we're gonna do with these articles.
yes, it's good to
Yeah.
hear the recommendations so that we know where we're going and what could happen to us.
So usually what would happen is I would be presented with a list of projects and I would say, okay, you know. You'd have to borrow for that because you don't have enough available funds to be able to do that. Some of the projects might have a. Like a grant match that's going to come in. So say a project is $3 million, but you're gonna get a $2 million grant towards that project. Then what I would say is, okay. Would recommend to borrow the 3 million in anticipation of getting that grant, so the grant would pay down the 2 million, and then we would only end up, our share would only be the $1 million. So those things happen too. And it really depends on what the committee wants to do, and then I would recommend how we're gonna finance those things. And, I mean, I don't wanna talk about specific projects tonight, but one of them is sort of falls into that where the town, the CPC share, the town share is only like 100 and something thousand. And my recommendation would be, okay, use the 640 for that, you know, and we would borrow for the rest, but the rest is gonna be reimbursed by a grant, so we wouldn't end up borrowing anything. You know, it's because the
That
grant would
makes
come in
sense.
and the grant
Yeah.
would come in and pay that off,
But
you
to
know.
increase the debt that we have, that we ain't being reimbursed for, makes no sense to me currently, looking at these numbers.
Well, every dollar we spend on interest is a dollar we can't buy land or.
That's
buy-
correct. You want as much bang for the dollar as you can get, so you have the funds available. And yes,
And I hate to belabor the point, but. Lisa, you had asked about the number highlighted in yellow. That's a failure of the Commonwealth. So I went,
yeah, we all know that.
I went to an event
This
a month
program
ago,
could be canceled
specifically to
tomorrow,
talk to the
reduced
lieutenant
by
governor.
50%.
And one of the things I told her is, I mean, the state has the money. So the first 5 or 6 years of the existence of this committee, it was a dollar for dollar match.
That's right.
So if we bought $1 million of land or $1 million investment in affordable, or $1 million to Michael for historical, we were only putting up 500.
Sure.
The state was coming in 500.
Back then, we couldn't fund enough
And
projects.
that number is a failure of the state house, inexcusable.
Well, it's on the deeds too, the
It's
recording
the
deeds
deed.
too. I mean, we're in a downturn in the market, so.
Right, but they can rectify that.
Yes,
They can fix that if they so chose.
It's supposed to be
I
dollar to
agree.
dollar.
Huh?
It's supposed to be dollar to dollar.
Well, and then last thing I'll say is, and then there was other communities like Duxbury that opted in at 3%. When this program first began, if you were doing 3%, your match was 2 to 1. So if Duxbury went off and bought a piece of land for $1 million, they were only paying 333, and the state was putting in the other 667.
So should we be contacting the coalition then? I mean, the other one, we're paying a lot of money to join them.
He's on it.
You should be able to get a gallon of gas for 33 cents too. That's it.
Betty,
Okay,
Yeah, but-
so, my understanding, we are voting on articles, these articles tonight to move forward. Either fortunate or unfortunate, and I'm gonna mention these articles by name because we had this discussion our last meeting. So the project with Mr. Gould, we're gonna get 90% of that back. Like Lynn said, I think it's gonna be kind of like short money. That's an opportunity that we really shouldn't miss.
right.
Full sale is another one. everybody that's sitting at this table knows that we've been trying to get the full sale for decades. And this is the first time we've got the opportunity to do that. And I think it's important to do. And the third, which everybody knows, that we are, we don't have enough affordable housing. And I know for myself, that was one of my main goals, is to be able to obtain affordable housing, because no one is going to really care about any of these other projects if they don't have a place to live. So, I do agree that, I mean, we should move forward. We don't like to borrow, but you know, we are getting $4 million a year. It's probably gonna, I mean, with the amount of people coming in, it's gotta get more than $4 million. We're gonna get some kind of word that it's more than that, instead of just $4 million. But I also think that, you know, we have to take these projects at face value of how they're going to affect the town moving forward, because we definitely need more affordable housing. We definitely don't want to lose the opportunity for the full sale that we've been trying to get for a couple decades. And we definitely don't want to give up the opportunity of getting a 90% grant. You know, that will cover one of the projects as well. So that's just my opinion. And, I mean, I'm ready to vote if there's any more information that someone can provide.
We'll wait until Lynn finishes up her presentation and we'll move on
Unless
to.
there's any other questions, the only thing that I would ask under my agenda item is if you would take a vote to, because we would submit this as an article from CPC to reduce that debt service budget. That's what I would need, other than any other questions that anyone has.
Does the committee have any discussion on moving this forward, and is there a motion?
So the overall value then would be making a motion for 56,395.
Yeah, it's a decrease of 56,390.
So moved.
Second.
Oops.
Okay, motion by Karen, seconded by John. Lynn?
So just so that it's correct in the minutes, with what's before us is a motion to approve the memorandum from Lynn dated today to reduce the debt service by the 56,747.
No, we got the bottom number. Bottom number.
56.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were right, 56,395. Apologize, okay,
Yeah, moving at the time.
and we have a motion on the floor and
Yeah,
seconded.
yeah.
Are we ready?
Mhm.
Ed,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Betty,
Yes.
Kim,
Yes.
myself, yes, John?
Yes.
Lisa
Yes.
and Michael.
Yes.
Passed unanimously.
Got the end of the
Yes.
You'll be around if we have to.
Oh, yeah, I'm
Good.
here, yeah,
Okay.
for the meeting. Oh, and I just want to say that, Fred,
Nice.
yeah,
Okay.
he is here, so
Okay.
he
made
chatted
that-
in that he was here.
Sure, we made that announcement earlier.
Hello, Fred.
Hello. Hi, Tim.
There he is, there he
Good
is.
evening, Fred.
Say that again.
We all said hi.
Oh, hey, yeah. Hi back to you guys.
Thank you. All right, our next agenda item is applications. The first one is affordable housing by NACO Inc. We've already got their paperwork from before.
Yeah.
And this one, we would, the committee, if we decide to move forward, with this, the committee has to make a decision on the percentage.
Right,
It'd be the 60 or 80%, which is gonna affect the amount of money that CPC would fund towards this affordable housing.
the 80% was the smaller number,
Yes,
That's 80% AMI.
yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
yes, Betty?
So after looking and especially at that one, and I know that we discussed, it is the 3.6 million. I'd actually like to amend that, a little bit lower to bring down, to 3.2 million. And that basically brings each unit, to around, and I could be wrong, Lynn, I'm not the mathematician here, to about 123-ish thousand. And
But,
as long as Mr. Veo agrees, which there was some room in where he was going the last time, and it was 60 and it was 80, but I believe that coming in at the 3.2 million for the 80%, which allows everyone to be able to bid on it. If it's something that he would agree to, that is what I'd like to move forward with, and not the 3.6.
So you wanted to amend it, the actual 60% is 3,450,000, the 80% is 4,650,000.
The other way around.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Maybe he put them in the other row.
Yeah, the 80% was the 3.6,
Yes, the 3,450,000.
right?
That is the 80, right? I know it's gonna, what's it that way?
So I would like to bring down the 80 to 3.2 million.
No, his
long
CPC
as-
funding, but 80% is 3.6 million, and the 60% is 4.8 million.
Right, okay.
Those figures you were reading as the developers.
So it is, okay.
Yeah, so 3.6 for 80%, 4.8 for 60%. And I think Betty, are you making a motion to move 3.2?
Yes.
Or just
But how does that affect the AMI?
the
It'll be
developer would just
80%.
have to come up with more money? That's basically what she's doing.
What you're saying, yeah.
But it's still
It would
reasonable.
still be 80%.
So the Greco has to come up with more money.
Right. Yeah, when I first looked at it, the maximum number, it worked out to like 200,000 a unit, which is a little bit much for affordable housing. But looking at this number at 120,
At the 4.8.
Yeah.
24 minutes, yeah.
24
Right.
units would be 133,000.
But that would have,
That's
that would
reasonable.
have brought the AMI really down to 60, replicating.
you're saying it's not 120, it's 130?
It's 133. If you do 3.2 divided by 24, it's
26.
150,000.
It's
what is
26
the-
units, isn't it? Or 24, I'm
Just
I
sorry.
think it's 24. According to his application, it's 24.
Requires borrowing.
Yes.
And I do understand that, it would be more of a cost to the developer. But I think we're just discussing all these things, and I think that I think it's feasible. We certainly don't want, one of the things that's, and I'm hoping that Lisa has an update, we don't want to be spending the amount of money that we spent for the Oak Street School on any more housing. And the Red Brook project really set that bar, for something that is a great deal for the town and the residents, and especially our senior citizens. So, but my motion remains as 3.2.
Mr. Brandon, discussion?
Yes. If we're borrowing,
But you want a second for the?
how long? Can I ask the question, or do you want a second?
Oh, yeah, okay, hold a second. It's a second on Betty's,
Second,
from Karen.
Now,
discussion,
now
yes.
discussion.
Yeah.
So, how much, so 3.2, we only have 600,000 remaining roughly. What is it, how long is the borrowing? 2 years? It
So,
has to be paid back.
no, it doesn't have to be paid. You can borrow for something like this up to 20 years. Mass General Laws allows you to do that. We've never done that. What we do is we try to pay it down when we have available funds. So,
So if we voted this in, question wise, we voted this in at 3.2, as long as McGreco agrees to it and says, yes, I'll do the 3.2. How long will we look to pay this thing back, and how does it affect that amount that we talked about that we currently already owe in payments.
So before she takes it, I just want to let you know, you referenced the 600 grand. I think that 600 grand is already allocated to Court Street, correct?
This, the 640 in undesignated fund balance is not allocated toward anything.
I'm sorry, I thought you were referring to the balance left in affordable.
No.
Okay.
No, so, so what I wouldn't recommend, if you were going to go forward with the McGregor one, I wouldn't recommend using any of the available funds. I would just authorize to borrow, and then we would use available funds as we go forward in future meetings to pay down the debt based on the cash flow requirements of that project.
But what I don't wanna do is seriously increase the amount of interest we're already paying by doing this either, so would it? By how much?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's, because it all depends on,
If we do it for 5 years or 10 years, or what is the maximum one we've ever done through the CPC as far as the funding?
we've
is
done
concerned?
5, I think this building, we paid back over like a 4-year period, I believe it was. And it was a $5 million.
But it's also being paid down with meal tax money also.
They used a small portion,
Just a-
250, but then we just returned 100 and
Yes,
something
that's-
like that at
yeah.
the last meeting. Because we didn't use it all.
By the way, this is a good time to bring this up, I know we requested, in addition to the meals tax up at the State House. How is that going?
So there's no information on that.
Yeah.
That's coming out yet from
Okay.
the State House. If it's included in the state budget is on her desk. She hasn't signed it
Okay.
yet, so
Okay,
we haven't
Thank
heard
you.
anything.
I'm kind of confused. We started having a conversation about whether we wanted to incur more debt, and we just kind of right by it, and now we're talking about, so we're talking about spending CPA money for fall town meeting for the year 2025, and we're gonna come back and get articles for the spring town meeting, and we've spent all the money. And the statute here says you shall spend the money. Doesn't mean you have to. I read in a lot of places where there's towns that don't spend any of it. It just said if you spend it, it has to be in these proportions. It doesn't say must, it says you shall. So I'm against us funding. On my radar, there's one project that I think deserves our support because the exposure is minimal. But I don't understand why we continue to do this and we're now going out 2027, 2028, as Tim has said, we don't know how long we're gonna do this. This idea of doing projects for doing projects without money that we have, I think is bad fiscal policy. I know it's worked in the past, but these people got used to, oh, the CPA will fund anything. Because we'll just go borrow the money. And I'd like to see us kind of take a step back. And, you know, I don't believe that the McGregor is a great, as I said, asked him when he was here making a presentation, I said, what's the value proposition for the town? I believe the value proposition for the town is 0.
oh, that's not true.
Ma'am, okay, please?
Please.
I believe it's 0, because basically we're giving him half the money to develop that development. That is not good, and to me, that's not a good investment. I understand what he's trying to do, and I understand he's trying to do something good. But it's basically, if you ask me to make that kind of investment, personally, I would not make that. So I'm just confused that we now jump right into talking about motions to reduce what we're willing to commit to some of these applications when we haven't addressed the bigger policy of this committee about how we are going to fund projects.
Betty Tobacco. Betty?
So the last time, I read language, legal language, shall and must are the same thing. In my opinion, I'm not an attorney, but that is my understanding. And it does give back to the town because people are desperate for housing, desperate for it. And this 80% project allows everybody, whether you're low income, average income, higher income, it allows everybody to be able to be involved in this particular project. So McGreco has, they've done a lot of projects in town. They're all good projects. We haven't had any issues with any of the projects. So like I said, for me, affordable housing is a priority for people.
Yes, months ago, this committee, decided to concentrate on housing.
Mhm.
Because it is needed. And, I know that everybody that in this building, the town manager also would like to see more housing. This is one of the few developers that came along with Grantham there, and said, I'm willing to do it. And, I mean, we have plenty of open space. And we could always use more, I guess so, but it's the housing that is needed. It is projects like David's that is needed. It is fixing the town brook that is needed. This isn't just for us or a small group. This is for the town. This is for our own townspeople to get the benefit, and there's plenty of benefit. So that's where I'm coming from.
Yes, Tim.
Okay, being on the planning board, we consistently and always try to get as much affordable housing as we possibly can. And I would agree with Betty and Karen, the importance of affordable housing in the town. It's workforce housing.
Yeah,
To tell you the truth, it's firefighters, it's new nurses,
teachers.
young people that are growing up and kind of want to stay in the town of Plymouth, the best and brightest, so to speak.
Yeah.
And they're being priced out of the town of Plymouth. So even though I am pretty frugal as far as spending money is concerned, I think everybody knows that through my history and the politics of the town of Plymouth. I think affordable housing is an important issue. If we're gonna go into any type of debt services whatsoever, as far as the budget concerned, I want to keep it as minimal as possible, but when you look at housing and you look at the project that's going on behind Home Depot and other areas across the town that have been forced on the town of Plymouth due to the regulations of the requirements of affordable housing. We also have the MBTA Communities Act that has also come into play. The governor's forcing housing down every single city and town. Housing is needed, not just in the state of Massachusetts, it's across the country. There's a shortage of housing, especially in the rural areas or in Plymouth and Boston. They're trying to find more housing, affordable housing, workforce housing. So to me, even though this may go into a debt service scenario, loan scenario, even though I'm not happy with it, I think it's important that we try and create as much workforce housing and affordable housing as we possibly can.
Mr. Tubin.
Lynn, based on this, if it goes through at 3.2, can you estimate what the cost of that 3.2 borrowing will be? You know, assuming, say, 5 years, which is typical.
So, I could, break out my amortization spreadsheet here. It would all depend on if the grant agreement that we established with him, if he wanted all the money up front, which normally that doesn't happen. We do it over like a time period of maybe a couple of years during construction. So based on that cash flow, the grant agreement might be an initial payment of $1 million, and then we pay over time. So we would incur an interest cost, obviously associated with that, which would probably be about a net interest cost of, say, about 4% on that cost. So if it was 3 million or if it was 1 million, it's about an interest cost of about 4%. And it would just be an interest cost, because you can borrow temporarily up to 2 years. But then that interest cost would obviously have to be paid for out of your future available revenues.
So it's like it would be 150 probably, right?
Right.
So I mean, the point I'm getting at is, if he agrees to a buy down, that's almost like covering some of the carry costs of the borrowing too, so.
Yeah.
He could come back and, I'm sorry, I don't wanna jump in. Sorry.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't support this. The debt that this committee has carried in the past was never to this level. It was never approached this amount. So even with Betty's motion and the reduction to 3.2, if you put the full sale on it, you're up to 4.1. If we put the cranberry bogs on it, and I'll call it
115,000.
okay, so now you're up to 4.2. 4.2 plus 13 million is a little over 17 million. 17 before we reduce any debt. I was in a hotel room in Western Massachusetts 4 weeks ago tonight, and I heard her say that if you had to bond the 13 over 20, it would be over 20 years. The payment was 1.3 a year. So 20 times 1.3 is 26 million. You're now paying 13 million in interest on a $13 million investment of combined. And the rule of thumb used to be that if you bonded something over 30 years, you pay back $2 for every $1 you borrow. Now it's down to 20 because interest rates are going through the roof. So now, if you go to Springtown meeting and you assume we're getting 4 million, and I'm just gonna play finance director here. I'm gonna sponsor an article for 1.1 to pay off the dredging of Jenny Pond. I'm gonna sponsor another debt pay down of 1.8 to pay off Stephen Steel to get rid of those two. That's a $3 million reduction. We still have 14 million hanging over our heads. But now this project and the industrial park project are kicking in July of next year. It's almost 10 million coming to bear simultaneously. And I mean, Rick Veo, you know, we saw a recent piece, maybe denigrating what Rick has done in the community. I mean, Rick's a developer. He's done some solid stuff in this community. It just, this from a debt perspective, I can't go any higher.
Wow.
Well, you can't go,
It's gonna.
I have a procedural question. If we reduce it to 3.2, does he have to he has to agree to that, or the application gets withdrawn? So we're changing the economics for him without him even being here. So as a vote on this, reduce it.
The committee can recommend any level of,
He doesn't have to be.
we can recommend any level, we can make a $1,000 contribution to this, Len, if we want to do
Okay,
anything.
right.
We can,
If he decides he doesn't like it, he'll just walk away.
That might be me, don't.
Hey, I thought I saw your hand up. We
yes, I have, I do.
lost that picture for a minute, but go ahead. Did you go to sleep?
Yeah.
Do you want me to wait to see if the owl comes back or?
No,
is it
go
okay?
ahead. We can hear you.
So, one of the things, John, that I will strongly disagree with you. And if you look back into your time machine, the CPC was a total failure with affordable housing. And that was over the past decade. And we have the figures to show that. Quite frankly, I wouldn't vote on any of the projects is if we had to make a choice to actually have housing for people that don't, affordable housing. So I'm a little, I guess I'm a little surprised that, you know, you don't want to increase the debt. And I'm not saying that I do, because I don't, but when you look at the needs of our residents. And like Mr. Grandy said, workforce housing, I mean, there are nurses and firefighters and police and our, people that can't afford to be in Plymouth. People that are moving out of Plymouth. And like I said, if I had to choose any project, affordable housing would be the project because CPC has failed epically in supporting affordable housing in the past.
Okay. Is there, any other discussion?
Yeah, just,
John?
Betty, I certainly agree with a couple of things you said. I disagree with the notion that there's a housing problem. I completely agree that there's an affordable housing problem. And again, a month ago, I specifically went to an event to get the ear of the lieutenant governor for 3 minutes, which I did. And I told her, A, the state match and the Community Preservation Committee is an embarrassment. They should be able to do something about that. And I said, the affordable housing policy at the state level, especially 40B, is a complete failure. Is a complete failure. And I said it as nice as I could. I agree we need affordable housing, but to take this number from 13 to 17, and we have no idea what's on the horizon. I just can't go that far.
May I?
Yeah.
I mean, clearly, John, and we discussed this little chat with the governor, who basically glazed over when you were talking to her. So, I mean, if we really want to get down to the politics of it, yeah, we need to put some people up at the State House that's going to fight for what's best for Plymouth. So, but like I said, I don't want to, and yes, you're right about affordable housing, but the reason why we have housing and not affordable housing is because of all the supposed 40Bs that got shoved down our throat that we haven't been able to change the recipe for.
Yeah,
So, I mean, now we have, the Grantham Group, that's a great project, moving forward with this. And there weren't, like I said, it just blows my mind that we spent $1 million on 3 units and keep spending money, and we don't even know where they are or what the completion is.
I'm bringing that
And
up.
now we have another opportunity to have 24 units of affordable housing. And what's going down the line? You know what? As far as I'm concerned, something down the line, it better be more affordable housing and not taking someone's land or knocking someone's house down or any more of that. We have plenty of open space right now. We need to get people the ability to stay in the town that they were born and brought up with, and affordable housing for our seniors or wherever else, workforce housing that's going to take it. So I hate to disagree with you, although some people think that is not the fact, but we're on completely opposite ends of this spectrum.
Mr. Grandy?
And may I ask to move the question?
Oh, thank you.
Huh?
So just to be sure, we have a motion by Betty to move the, sorry.
Make Greco
uh,
affordable housing project.
3.2.
And Karen seconded.
Karen seconded, so.
Yes.
And who made the motion?
Betty.
Betty, okay. You ready for the vote?
Yeah.
Ed,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes,
Betty,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes,
Len, no. John,
no,
Lisa,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
yes. The motion carries 6-7 to 2.
62?
6 to 2.
Sorry.
Yeah, we have one answer, right? Not the
Sorry,
church.
okay.
Yeah,
Can't see.
and he was away, so probably hasn't been sworn in yet, so.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So just, okay, the next, application is up tonight for discussion and vote on is open space Black Cat Road, David Gould. Thank you.
So the Black Cat, the proposed Black Cat acquisition, had originally been voted on the committee at 1.4 million. As I explained last time, we went back and had the appraisal updated to exclude a couple of acres that had 2 buildings that we were not interested in acquiring. So that came in at 1.15 million. We have applied for a grant. That would that would provide reimbursement for 90% of the project acquisition costs. So that was $1,035,000. So leaving 115,000 if we were successful in receiving the grant. The Commonwealth had told us that they were trying to award within 45 days of the closing of the RFP. If I did my math right, that's the end of next week, so we still have not heard, but hopefully very soon. So again, it would be 1.15 million. If we're successful with the grant, we would receive $1,035,000 back for 115,000.
And that's 92 acres of land.
Yes.
Any discussion from the committee?
I have a question. So. If the grant doesn't come through, is the deal done? We're only authorizing 115, we're not authorizing the 1.1 million.
No, we have to
Yeah.
authorize the full amount,
You'd have to do the full amount.
otherwise there is no reimbursement.
I think that,
But we can word it so that if the grant is not
Yes.
through,
And you don't have to proceed.
it's done.
I would, I mean. My intention is to vote for this, and if he tells us in a week or two. That the 90% has not come through, then we have a subsequent agenda, meeting with an agenda item and revisit it. That's what I would.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I understand we talk about housing and all that, but as the future of this town, this, again, I go back to my business perception of this. It's just, it's hard to justify spending this money for this because it's 115,000. I'm being optimistic for 100 acres. That's $1 an acre.
Yeah, the
You
headwaters,
could buy a land anywhere in the country for $1 an acre. Please let me know, because
It's got more work than that too, because it's protecting.
that's right, that's right. I mean, we're not even talking about the intrinsic value, we're just talking about cost.
Lisa has a question.
Yes,
What would the land be used for?
So it's about 92 acres, approximately 70 are cranberry bogs. Those cranberry bogs would be retired. They would be restored back to naturally occurring wetlands like we've done on other sites. As I almost said, Chief, as Mr. Bradley just mentioned, the value of that restoration is that it would improve water quality for Billington, Townbrook, and Plymouth Harbor, all of which are impaired waterways. So being able to reduce all the net nutrient loading from those bogs, discharge all the way through that watershed would be a significant improvement in water quality. It would also just be open space that people could walk, hike, bike, bird.
And the bucket of money at the state level is specific to take cranberry bogs out of production and do a restoration, correct?
Yeah, they wanted
The
to.
grant
but-
program is
yeah.
called Cranberry Bog Acquisition for Restoration. That's the actual grant
And
program.
that's where the over 900 is coming from that
Correct.
fund.
Yeah.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
any other discussion?
I'll move approval.
Or do we want to move for approval with, under the, did we get the grant?
What the language is that we should receive the grant.
Yeah, with that we received the grant. Oh, I know what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, I was right here, I said motion.
You don't want to revisit it at the next meeting if he comes back with bad news?
It could still be in, I think it could do both.
Then we can do that.
Yeah, we're
Subject
It may not be.
Subject to
Subs-
the granting of the
Grant
money from the
approval.
state for the grant.
Yeah, that's fine, Ed, yeah, put that in there.
Who made the motion?
Nobody yet.
Nobody.
Oh, nobody, yeah.
So basically, the motion to fund in full, subject to grant approval.
Does somebody want to make a motion
Motion so made.
by Mr. Grant?
Second,
Seconded by John Mahoney.
Ready to vote? Mr. Bradley,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes,
Betty,
Yes,
Tim,
Yes.
myself, yes, John?
yes,
Lisa,
Yes,
Michael,
Yes.
unanimous.
So it's subject to grant,
Grant
Approval, 90% grant.
100%. And then, I would recommend that the difference, the 115,000, that we take that from the available funds.
That's fine.
Yeah, from the 640, and that way we would authorize to borrow what the grant would be, and the grant would just reimburse us.
Yes. Agreed.
and if he comes back at less than 90%, I would expect that we would revisit this, Mr. Chairman, at a future meeting, correct?
Obviously, if you came back less than 9%, I'll vote, and somebody here, I'm sure would bring it up and want to
Yeah,
revisit.
so,
it.
but,
Yeah.
but if the grant comes in at 10%, and if we're at 72%, there's a big difference there, and that warrants a
So
discussion.
subject to.
Depending on what the level is.
Yeah.
Subject to 90%.
Not just subject to a grant, subject to 90%.
Yeah, right, something to 90% reimbursement. All set on that one? Okay, the next one is the full sale, again, David Gould.
So the full sale, proposed acquisition, as you all know, is located on Taylor Avenue. It's the former Full Sail building. It includes 6 different parcels, 3 of which are on the ocean side, and then there's multiple parcels that are a gravel parking lot off of St. Charles Avenue. So it would be both the shore side and the landward parcels, all associated with the full sale. The appraised value is $655,000. The requested CPC was $875. There's a $220,000 difference there. That would be to allow the town to demolish the building, dispose of it, prep the site for some of the site amenities, including access to the site, access from the site down to the beach. Doing some small improvements to the parking lot, mainly bringing and filling, grading it off. We're not proposing paving. If the town decides to do a gate or anything else there, that funding would allow us to do all of that work. Site amenities that we've talked about, nothing has been permanently decided yet. But we talked about things like benches and shade sails and some landscaping to make the site much more aesthetically pleasing. That's where that 220,000 would go towards. And I provided an estimate to the committee at the last meeting to justify that, and we'll continue to flesh that out in greater detail. I think that's about it.
And acquiring the land would also give the ability for the DPW to make some improvements for stormwater issues that are in the area.
Yes, and we've looked at that. Engineering did some recent survey work out there, mainly for topography, so we could look at those kind of things.
Yeah.
So we actually got a first draft of that survey plan today, so we'll be moving forward with looking at the grades and topography for providing access down. Obviously, those have impacts on the cost. So if it's a 50-foot gangway versus an 80, there's a cost difference there. So we got to figure out the grades and topo. But it will also provide information on groundwater and how much material we have there that we could potentially get some infiltration and stormwater improvements.
Do I have a motion?
Just
Oh,
one
do you have
clarification,
any questions for David?
yeah.
Okay.
just one clarification on that. We are not proposing to use the CPA money for stormwater improvements.
Right, that would be DPW.
That would be W. I just
Under
wanted
their
to be clear. Yeah.
As you know, David, I think it, don't quote me, but maybe 18 years ago, CPC, I think John was there.
Not that long ago, but.
15,
Junior high back.
yeah,
Telling you, getting a little long in the tooth there, guy.
it was a long time ago. And
Time machine.
Bill was there. And Bill was there and I was there and a few people from Whitehorse Beach, and we wanted that property to give back to the citizens and make access, and you're right, it's been years. absolute years of torture, and it's finally getting done. And I'm really pleased about it because it's gonna really improve the area and help a lot of people. So I'm pleased about this.
John?
Just a big assist to my colleague, Charlie Bletzer on this one. He reached out, he established a contact with the owner and had a great conversation and then handed it off to David, and this is how we got here.
Great.
So can you answer some questions about the parking lot for me? Who will have access to that parking lot?
So those decisions haven't been fully determined, but the concept is that they would be open to the town of Plymouth residents. So
The whole thing,
you would need a beach sticker to access the parking.
but not just the White Horse Beach people.
Correct, the property would be like any other town-owned parcel. It's owned by the inhabitants of the town of Plymouth, so it should be open to Plymouth residents.
So my comment about this is, it's interesting that all these years, this gentleman was not willing to do anything. And now all of a sudden he is. And there's something coming, was at town meeting last year. Last fall that didn't pass, there's something coming to town meeting this fall that possibly will pass. That would change the landscape for that piece of property,
What are you referring to?
the blight bylaw. Well, I'm not sure that's the right term for it. So my question is this opportunistic? You know, you guys, I'm coming from a different place with this committee and the way things are done. I have no old school. Point. You're gonna hear me ask the hard questions that maybe nobody else will. That's just what I'm doing here. I just find it opportunistic in my mind. And now we're gonna give this guy a lot of money for this piece of land that probably if that went out to the open market, he would never get it. We can't negotiate the price that the statute doesn't allow us to negotiate on the appraised value. So I'm just interested in that. I have mixed feelings about this. I want that piece of property to be cleaned up. I want that parking lot to be able to be used to people to access the beach. But I just find it interesting. I just wanted to go on the record that I find it interesting, yet all of a sudden after, I'm a new resident of Plymouth. Decades of him not doing anything, all of a sudden he was willing to listen to somebody talk to him. And get paid for it. So just a comment.
John?
Yeah, Len, so I don't think we know exactly why this individual decided to sell now, but it could have been just hearing a different voice in the individual like Mr. Bletzer who had a connection. You could have an individual who over the last 20 years transitioned from their 50s into their 70s or their 60s into their 80s and wants to set some life things in order. You know what I mean? The process I go through is that, you know, that we have to have an appraisal. You have to negotiate off an appraisal. So we've seen appraisals get done and property owners have said, I want X amount above the appraisal. Well, there have been other people who have said, you know, I'll take X amount below the appraisal, get me this number. The appraisal's high, I will take it. So, you know, I looked at the department head. Is the appraisal at 655 out of whack? And he tells me it's not. So then I got I have no problem moving forward with that, you know.
Mr. Grady?
Yes. If you look at any master plan through any village center or wherever in the town of Plymouth, every one of them also, all of them say the same thing. Let's gain access to the waterfront or a pond or a lake. So this goes right into the direction of the master plan, which is being rewritten. It could meet up with the Village Center Steering Committee, the Cedarville Steering Committee, all the committees throughout the town. Public access to a pond, lake, body of water, the ocean is something we should be striving for. And this does that in the process.
Yes. John?
And then the last thing, and then is that Mr. Bletzer, Mr. Quintal and others have served on the Plymouth, the PGDC, the Growth and Development Corporation, was in charge of, you know, the semi-public private entity that runs paid parking. They put a number of value on a parking space. There's 24 here, and they'll tell you how much that space would go for down on the waterfront, and it's in the tens of thousands of dollars for each one.
I just wanted to raise the.
Yeah, there's a significant
That's why we
value.
discussed it, right?
That's right, that's why we're having the discussion.
The only thing I could offer, until you mentioned, I hadn't quite thought about the timing of it. I will say though, in my experience, which I'm getting long in the tooth with John too, so for a couple decades buying.
It's gonna go a little longer, I
Um,
think.
Honestly, it's not unusual for me to talk to a potential landowner or a potential seller for over a decade, and they're just not ready. And then we reach out to them a few years later, family dynamics change, the kids grow up, they're looking to so it's not uncommon to have these long, decade-long relationships with people, and then finally they're ready to sell. So I think what you mentioned, the timing is very interesting. I hadn't quite thought about it. But it's not uncommon for me to experience people waiting quite a long time before they're ready, so.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, you can never predict what a person's, all of us are gonna do in certain situations.
Absolutely.
If you get into that business and you can figure it out, come see me, I got another wire, money in my pocket.
Yeah.
So then my next question is, how do we fund this?
That would be for Lynn.
Yeah.
I didn't say live, but it was an open-ended question.
This one, we could. So again, I think, if we're using 115,000 of the 646.42, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
642,043.
Yeah. What we could do is maybe we could do like 220 for the other costs and borrow for the, purchase of the property, the 655. We could do it something like that. Combination of,
And how soon would he pass it on?
So oftentimes at fall town meeting, as an example, last year, we bought 2 properties at fall town meeting, closed on both of those by the end. Yeah.
Okay. So we would be looking for money in January, probably.
You spend money, it makes me cough.
We have to decide how to fund it with the motion.
Profit.
yeah, so what we could do is I could go back, when you have another scheduled meeting for August. What is it, the Thursday prior is it prior to the deadline of August 9th?
I think it's.
Or no? You're not meeting with them?
We have not. Or with the eighth,
Should have one.
we have one scheduled for the eighth.
Yeah.
We bladed in every twice a month for the
Yeah.
next couple of months.
We're meeting August 8th.
Right.
I'm just saying, if we're gonna do a motion tonight, do we have to have those details worked out, or do we just do a motion conditionally on figuring out how?
Usually the way you've done it in the past is conditionally upon a recommendation from the finance department.
If that helps, 612. 527 versus the 875, that helps, So this 6, what was it, 642?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you were gonna
Gives you
use 115
527,
versus Black Cat is 527
Okay,
versus, so you can think about what you want. In
yeah,
terms of the
yeah.
split between borrowing and using.
yeah, so you can do it based on the recommendation of the finance department.
If that's what the motion is, that we can,
So the motion to approve the application with financing. Conditional. I'm just trying to write here as I speak, and I can't do those two things, conditional on recommendation of finance.
but yeah, we'll get the recommendation from the finance director on how to fund it. Or you could break the numbers out tonight.
Second,
Yeah, Betty.
So who made the motion?
Nobody yet. We'll just get ready. Betty?
motion,
Oh.
just kind of elaborate on, some of the things that Len was saying and actually to what David was saying. I mean, I've been here longer than I can remember, and once the full sale closed, it was always something that the town sought. And I remember probably when I was in office, maybe the second year, I had discussions with them as well, and they were almost ready to pull the trigger, and they wanted to pull the trigger, and then they backed off. So, like I said, we've been trying to get this property for decades. And just to, I don't know if you thought this otherwise, Len, but White Horse Beach is all Plymouth Beach sticker parking. It's nothing specific
Yeah.
for just White Horse Beach. So
Okay.
anybody that has a Plymouth Beach sticker can come down to White Horse Beach. Nothing is special about that. It's not a special White Horse Beach sticker.
Okay. Does anybody want to make a motion that we accept this and we funded with the recommendations of the finance director?
So moved.
Motion.
Karen, and seconded by Tim.
You guys ready?
Yeah,
Ready?
How do you vote, Ed?
Yes.
Karen,
yes.
Betty,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Len, yes, John,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
and Michael.
Yes.
Unanimous.
From the public wants to, if you want, there might be somebody on, I'm not sure.
And raised, you see?
There's no hands raised.
They can't see it up close.
Yeah, that's something.
Mr. Chair.
How's that?
CPC request
Someone has raised their hand.
next year, 100,000.
Mr. Donato?
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Is this public comment?
No, we're not there yet.
Okay, when you're ready. Thank you.
Okay, we'll call on you. Thank you. The next order of business is the historic, which was the Bud White presented by Dolly Snow and Bicknell and Scott Day. I do have some information that I would like to share with the committee before we get into that. We did ask town council to review all of these applications to make sure that we had everything in line. And her comment on the Bud Light was that federal legislation allows this transfer of the lighthouse to the current owner precludes certain actions involving the lighthouse. Specifically, 54 U.S. Code Section 305104 governs the transfer of lighthouses. Subsection 6 prevents any encumbrances from being placed on the lighthouse without the approval from the secretary. The historic preservation restrictions required by the CPA is, in their opinion, an encumbrance. And it would need prior approval of the secretary. In other words, our council is recommending that we do not approve this.
I have that copy. It was all sent to everybody today, right?
Well, I think
And
maybe,
we discussed this at length at the last meeting, so I'm prepared to make a motion now to deny the application. Unless anybody would like to further discuss it
Second.
further. I don't think there's any need for it.
well, I was
I'll
just gonna
second.
say, so discussion after this.
Discussion, yeah.
I think it's worth it in a different place. It might be worth the discussion, but until that's solved, until maybe they look into it and get it approved by the Secretary of State. You know, like I was talking to John about it, if they provided some kind of public, if they're willing to provide some kind of public access. That there's a benefit to the town, so I think maybe it's something for the future, but I think based on that and. I don't think they're amenable to any type of access, so,
No,
and
so
so,
this needs to be moved.
I mean, it is, you know, it's the oldest iron lighthouse in the country, it's kind of a fixture for Plymouth, so there is definitely some value to it, but. I just don't think it's ready for prime time, I think.
Motion in a second.
So we have a,
Second.
Yeah, we had a second, Betty.
I did.
Second.
Seconded.
Oh, she did, okay.
Yeah, Betty seconded. John?
So I didn't say this 4 weeks ago, I was remote. So. There was a site visit out there last fall, myself, the town manager, and Mr. Gould attended, and we were asked by the individual that presented to you 28 days ago, what was the town of Plymouth's interest? Because we told them that we wanted to partner with them for the Gurnett light, the other light that's on land out there. And we told them, taking care of the lighthouse and incremental access for the citizens of Plymouth.
Mm.
And they flat out said absolutely not.
Well,
They had no
that's it.
interest in partnering with us. They were moving forward to gain control of the second lighthouse to keep people out. So
Yeah,
I can't even if we had a $15 million surplus, I wouldn't give them a
Did
penny.
it even say it, if they have the 1.5 million, they just don't wanna use it? Have I read that all?
Not that I'm aware of.
It said they have the 1.5 million, but they didn't wanna use it all. I thought that's what I read in the
they
application.
said they had some money, but I don't know
I don't
what it
know.
was.
Yeah, read it all. I thought
Alright.
they said they have it.
Sounds good.
Okay, go ahead.
So we
Let's
have a
go.
mo- We have a motion on the floor to deny the application, basically. Yes,
And it was
and it's
second.
been motioned by Tim and seconded by Betty.
Just a point of order.
So,
I was always told to make motions in the affirmative and then you just say no. Is that all right, Terry?
No, we don't,
No?
planning board, we don't do that. We can make motions to vote against.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
oh, so what you're saying, to accept the application and then vote against.
everybody voted against.
So just make a motion to vote for it and then everyone says.
My
no.
vote is to deny the application. That's my motion.
I think it's,
And we'll accept this motion, yeah.
I'll
You ready?
second that.
Yes.
no, let's just, Mr. Bradley,
Yes, to deny.
to deny. We a motion to deny the application. Karen,
Yes,
Betty,
Yes,
Tim,
Yes.
myself, yes, Mr. Mahoney,
Yes,
Lisa,
Yes.
and Mr. Tubman,
Yes.
unanimous.
Next order of business is some housekeeping. Grant representation. Lynn?
Oh, so, for the project, for the Plymouth Center for the Arts project and for the Pilgrim Hall Museum, there needs to be a, historic district representative, which historic district would appoint their own members.
We already do have somebody.
Okay, and then CPC votes to appoint a member to be on, the overseeing committee of those projects, and I don't think CPC has voted anyone
Right.
for
that's
those
what I
two
should-
projects.
These two projects do not, at this current time, have someone from CPC
Right,
on it.
yeah,
So we're looking for someone, to be on the Plymouth Center of the Arts, appointment from CPC and one to Pilgrim Hall Museum. Is there anybody that's willing to?
what were those numbers again? One for,
Plymouth Center for the Arts,
you need one person?
one person, and Pilgrim Hall Museum, one person.
So actually, well, so this HTC has Ann Mason on Pilgrim Hall. Bill Fornachari was the HTC rep on the library. So now that he's not there, I guess I can be both, right? HTC and CPC.
Yes, you
I
could.
could, yes.
So I gotta do that if,
My God, that's perfect.
All in favor?
It's
Yes.
unanimous.
So wait a minute, Michael, you're on the program museum.
No,
He's the historic district. and
No, I understand that, but you're volunteering as EPC rep for which one,
the
the?
library.
Plymouth Center for the Arts.
Yeah,
Okay.
But then you would also be the CPC appointment for the other one, because you're already on that one.
I'm not on Pilgrim Hall. Ann Mason is.
Oh, yeah.
Plymouth Center of the Arts, he's gonna do both Plymouth Center of the Arts.
So not both projects. I'm saying I'll be both
You'll do-
HTC and CPC.
For Plymouth Center for the.
Plymouth Center of the Arts. You still need somebody.
Okay, so you need someone from Pilgrim Hall Museum.
Yeah, I'll do Pilgrim Hall.
John
Okay,
Mahoney is
so does-
volunteering for Pilgrim Hall.
Okay,
So moved.
Okay, so Tim's moving that
thank you, Joe.
he's gonna do Plymouth Center for the Arts, John's gonna do
Thank
Pilgrim Hall
you.
Museum.
Right.
Do we have a second?
Second,
Second by Karen.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah,
All right, here we go again. Mr. Bradley,
yes.
Ms. Bukes,
yes,
Ms. Cavaco, Mrs. Cavaco.
yes,
Mr. Grandy,
Yes, please.
myself, yes, Mr. Mahoney.
Yes,
Mrs. Ryder
Yes.
and Mr. Tubman,
Yes.
unanimous. Okay,
Next order on business is the FY 24-25 CPA application review. And I know, John, you
Had a
have spent
bunch.
some time and
Yes, I saw the,
the work that Chelsea had done.
yeah, and I thought that the pendulum, Mr. Chairman, had swung too far in the other direction. It was oversimplified.
Okay.
And I don't have my laptop with me, but I thought that, given what occurred at the last town meeting with the three affordable, housing applications, that what they saw and voted on was completely different what the committee sent forth. That, some of the questions, just, okay, how many total units? Do you want me to circle around with her?
No, yeah, we definitely,
And-
I mean, it's
and
still a
by-
work in progress, so.
Yeah, oh, okay, all right, so I got this, I talked to the director of planning, total units in the proposal.
Yes,
Okay, are they rental or are they owned?
yes.
Okay, the number of affordable units. How many, what's the area median, the AMI, okay, how many of the units are counting towards the community's SHI?
Yes, it does.
Subsidized housing inventory? And then, and that data should be signed off on by, and Mr. Hartman said Peggy Whalen, the Director of Community Development. So I don't know, that's what he's advising, I don't know whether it's Lee or Peggy.
Somebody.
Or the town manager or somebody. And then this committee would get an application with all that information filled out, signed off on by the proper person. And now we have that and we know that we're voting, deliberating on accurate information.
Somebody's done the due diligence.
Exactly.
It doesn't fall on our shoulders to do that. If I may speak, the other thing is I think we should have an application which should have instructions. There's no reason for the instructions to be part of every application. It should be. The instructions that were there was bigger than the application and
And if it was up to me, Lynn, there would be a giant black thick border around the affordable section. So that is just highlighted as a signature.
This application,
Yeah.
this one I just got from Jared Prendisi.
Well, that's because that's the existing document.
That's the existing one,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah.
Yeah, I think.
One of 14 pages, yes.
Yeah, I think it could be, it looks like to me, it could be a two-page
But
application.
then how does somebody that knows nothing about the CPC?
Then it's on the website, the application instructions.
I kind of like the way it is. It gives it actually gives the instructions. and-
I've never seen anybody put that instructions at that detail, if we do, we really need to pare it down. It's way, I don't think anybody reads that.
Has it been confusing anybody? I
Yeah,
don't think so.
I think some people don't use, some of the people we get, I mean, they're older, there's older people with properties that don't use computers, I think, for them to have it.
Just fine, just fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got four, sheet
So for
four.
right now,
Sounds-
keep the instruction.
yeah,
Yes, yes, and update,
Yeah, what John, yeah.
yes, so that we get some clarification. As much as due diligence,
Yeah.
is done before the committee gets to vote on it. And then we'll know for sure the committee is voting on exactly the same thing that,
oh, yeah.
town meeting is the same.
Yeah, so we'll make some modifications to it. We'll present it to the committee again, work in progress, and then you guys can vote on it eventually.
Okay.
We'll add those changes.
Thank you.
Now, did the committee want to talk about future meetings, schedule, location and format? We want to keep the Thursday nights, we want to keep the 5:30, I know Thursdays.
5:45. I mean,
Traffic is.
it's bad. When you leave hanging at 4:30, sometimes you can't make it here by 5:30.
Oh, I'm good. I think the next meeting we definitely want to keep because it's before the deadline of.
Yeah.
We just want to double check, well, because what Chelsea and I will do is prepare the articles, prepare what they're gonna look like. Have you guys sort of, say, yep, everything looks good. What we're gonna include for backup materials that get submitted to, the town manager's office for one. So we'll have that ready for you on the night of the eighth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like how it's early because if I may, through the chair.
Yes.
Because a lot of Thursday nights, there's multiple meetings. Building committee meets on Thursday nights, but they meet at 6:30. So as long as we don't get interference on that, And the Cedarville Steering Committee likes to meet on Thursday nights also. It's tough to be, you can't be involved in 5 places at once.
And you live on the other side of the world.
That's right.
So if you were to change the time, what would you want to change it to?
I think 5:30 is fine. I just gotta leave work a little earlier.
Okay. Okay.
I just wanted, so this is the first town meeting without Bill, so all that stuff he did with caucuses and printing out all those materials, he would spend like days putting out. That's still gonna be done with
Yeah, so we would prepare,
the books.
we'll put together a book or, you know, a recommendation book from CPC, because that's part of the requirement of the statute to have a book of recommendations from CPC. As far as covering the caucuses, I would suggest that maybe the committee breaks that up,
You gotta
You
spread it
know,
out.
spread it out and, you know.
I guarantee you this, I'm not making every caucus to make presentations, that's
Yeah,
for sure.
I had this conversation with Mr. Fornashari, but Mr. Bradley. I mean, this is oversimplistic, but 9 into 18 is 2. I have no problem picking up 2. Ms. Kabako, I believe, chairs her own precinct.
Mhm.
I have no problem if somebody can only get to 1, picking up a third, but
A lot of
on the
times.
briefing books, in my opinion, there are some of these articles, they can be, you know, the data can be simplified. And some of them that are a little bit more complex, you might need more data, and I think we should be putting the amount of data in the package that correlates to the level of complexity for any particular article.
Yeah,
And I think what we'll do is we could bring a draft of the book back to you guys and you guys can take a look at it, you know, and say, yep, that looks good, that's the, you
Well,
know.
the presentation is also made to the Board of Selectmen, right?
and the town meeting,
Advising and
And
finance.
FinCom,
Before town meeting, it goes to selectmen.
yeah.
and
That's-
FinCom.
Committee of precinct chairs.
And Chelsea can put together like a PowerPoint presentation of all your applications, the votes, everything that. You know, I mean, we can take a stab at it to put like a PowerPoint presentation together and then bring that back to the committee. For any modifications or anything like that.
He's the public face now of this committee. You know, dozens, if not hundreds of times, getting up on town meeting floor and talking about the budget with respect to his department. And, you know, he can go and hit the big boards and then we, you know, there should be a spreadsheet and a schedule, Mr. Chairman, and we talk about
This time.
who's gonna be inserted. Oh, and the other thing is some of these precincts, Tim, some of them double up.
Yes.
1 and 2, and some of them.
Yeah.
So
When
that
I was
helps.
a town meeting member, that's what we used to do.
I'll do 7.
So I'm on the charter review committee, so we're having the same issue about we have to go to all these people and discuss this. Thing we did to the charter, and we're creating something called an executive summary of what we did. So we might think about doing something like that. You know, it's like a talking point, so that way it's consistent with people hear the messaging they hear. And it doesn't leave it open to anybody's interpretation and ambiguity and get into these situations where, oh. Somebody said this at this place and when somebody else said this at this other place.
Well, I think,
That may be part of that package.
I think the biggest question at town meeting, at caucuses, and hopefully Lynn will be at the caucus, because it's gonna be finance.
Finance.
Why are you spending this, you know, you're gonna be walking people through the finance.
Well, usually a finance committee member is present at the caucus,
Right, somebody,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's how it's done. Usually they assign finance.
Can't
committee
expect her to
members.
be at all the costs.
And
no,
we'll present at the COPC will have a article presentation night, so we usually. we
You're there for
present
that.
all the articles and we're there for that to answer any questions and usually town meeting members go to that CPC meeting, it's.
Or they're watching it on TV, yeah.
And then you can always say, I'll get back to you on that.
Yep.
You know, and you can email them.
Right.
Yeah,
As long as you don't say it too many times, I'll get back to you on that.
No,
no,
no.
But gathering questions and then sending an email out to everybody
Yeah.
with the answer is always.
Yeah.
Always good.
and having Chelsea as support, I think is gonna be helpful. It'll go through her, you know, and back to the committee and, you know, back to her meeting.
In the presentation and, you know, slide for town meeting, obviously, Peter Gould does a lot of that, and on this, we can work with Joe Young.
Yeah.
Work with Joe Young to make sure that it's ready,
Yeah,
for town meeting for, when that book comes.
sounds good.
Huh? I needed it.
Any, new or old business?
One other thing.
Yes.
We reorganized, I assume Len's the secretary and the clerk, the secretary, I didn't, that part didn't get reorganized.
Yeah.
What do you have to?
He
Sorry,
already had it.
sorry to the clerk.
Oh, okay.
When Bill was appointed
Oh,
to
okay.
vice, I got somehow selected as the clerk.
Okay.
And we
I
had
think it's
a long
about-
conversation of whether we needed a clerk or not, and here we are without Chelsea, so now we have the clerk here.
Also, Chelsea's usually here taking the minutes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes,
The
John.
old new business,
Yeah.
somebody brought it up earlier, I think Betty. When Russ Shirley was here, like a month or two ago, he announced that this Oak Street project will be completed, oh, Lisa, in mid-August. Is that?
I wasn't at the last meeting, so I'm not prepared to speak, but yes, they do need additional funding, and I was under the impression that they were putting together and.
Oh, my God.
a request.
Additional funding?
That's.
Well, I don't wanna get into a long conversation on it.
Right,
to tell
and
you
I'm
the
not.
truth, Cause we don't have all the
prepared to
information
speak because
yet.
I wasn't at the last.
So can we put her on the, can you have 2 weeks from tonight, have an update specifically on that project, and what's
Yeah.
going on? Because I was just gonna say, if there's gonna be a ribbon cutting or a completion of this project, finally, we need to put some positive light on that.
Mhm.
But you're telling me
Exactly.
that's not the case.
I
I'm
don't think
ready.
so, but I was not at the last meeting, so I'm not prepared to speak.
It always is.
Is that why
We will put, on next agenda. Yeah. Yeah, status update.
Yeah.
When I do the minutes, I'll, I'm voting up.
No, it's gonna happen.
Okay.
Any other old business or business from the committee?
Ed?
Yes.
Oh,
there you
sorry.
are. Betty, go ahead.
When we're getting that update, could you also, or maybe Lynn knows how much we've spent on that project altogether?
Yeah.
I
So,
just,
a Summary,
I'm horrified that there's gonna be additional funding. Honestly, I'm like all set.
When did that project?
come on, we can discuss this when that comes up. I'm ready to go home.
I'm all
Oh, no, we
set.
haven't done yet.
El Donato?
Yeah. we haven't done the public hearing yet.
John.
Oh,
Hey, Don, when did that project go through town meeting?
Then, under new business, I had one, an email from the CPA coalition.
Oh, yeah.
It recommended, strongly recommends to us, that we have a consultant for any type of housing projects that we want to look at in the future. Housing is quite complicated, and as they know on the state level, volunteers can't be expected to know all the right questions to ask. We should see a pro forma for any housing development, and that'll fill in all the gaps for us. And we need somebody that understands that and can follow it through. They were referencing some past ones that they looked at for us, and they saw the amount requested, and there wasn't much explanation for how we arrived at that figure. And I think before we can get up to, in front of town meeting and actually recommend a project and an expenditure for public, for affordable housing, we have this, we hire one up there, and there's quite a list of them, consultants that could help us out with that. And it would back us up, and that money from what they're telling, we can take it out of the administrative, budget that we have. So that was their strong recommendation to us. We've been trying to do a good job, but we really need to have some pressure. Yes, Karen?
I sort of agree with that, but how much would that cost?
We'd have to put it out to bid, so if
Right.
it's anything that's over, I would think that hiring a consultant's gonna be at least $10,000 a year, so.
can we find out how much that is before we move forward with it? Please?
It was just new discussion, yep, we have to look at.
I think it's a great idea, something to look at.
That's fine, let's look at it. Next,
Now, public comments,
I take you,
first, yes,
Jeannie Davis.
yes.
I'm no longer observer from the legal and voting, so I can speak at public comment. But Susan, Dwyer is still, she's the observer in the legal and votes, just so that you know who we are. But, I'm glad you spoke about that, because one thing, there's new members here, and on November 9th of 2023, the gentleman who's in charge of the coalition from the state, remember, he came down and talked. And I have this, you know, he sent it to me, so I printed it out. It was a wonderful talk, but it explains where the money comes from, which some of you already know because you've been on it for a long, long time, but other people don't. And I refer to this all the time, you know, as people ask questions. So I think to invite him to come again as soon as possible, once you've got a force to get ready for town meeting. I understand. And Betty, I'm sorry, I'm back.
Oh,
But then
I didn't
looking-
hear what you first said, Jenny. Could you just repeat the
Sure,
beginning? of
just
it?
a recommendation.
Please.
Oh,
Come over here.
Betty, I mean,
Don't
Jenny.
stand by the speaker.
The owl. Sit down by there.
Hoo, hoo. Hey, Betty, what I just said is, and I think you were here last year too, when the Plymouth, the community preservation gentleman came down from Boston, and he did his PowerPoint presentation about the CPCA. And I just found it really, really interesting. And they also recommend when you have a lot of new members to do some of the workshops. Because it's I think it's one of the most complicated committees there is, and I've been going to these meetings since, right, December of 2022, every single meeting, I missed one. And it's complicated, and so that's just my recommendation as a person that really loves this committee and loves this town and wants you all to be the best you can be, right?
Thank you.
That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your service too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Mr. Donato, the public comment, you have?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll cut to the chase. Al Donardo, Town Meeting Precinct 17. I'll just expand on my colleague Ginny said. There's still a lot of misinformation about your committee. And I was surprised this week to hear it online that even a former member of the Finance Committee seems to think that your funding can be used for police and fire. And it's just ludicrous. Obviously, it's segregated money. The citizens have okayed this. It's above and beyond the general fund. And I don't know what this committee does to try to further educate the public on this issue. I think it's important. That's A. B, the other issue, back to Article 16C here in Red Brook. And you've talked about interest tonight, payments. And, you know, I bought a vehicle this week, and the first time in my life, I never put any money down. Somehow Ford's given me 1.9%. I was crazy to use my money in order to, you know, so my point to that is that there's benefits sometimes of paying interest. And I think especially with affordable housing, and this was lost on 16C, that part of that money that you put in is actually a rent credit. And that after 15 years, the citizens were enjoying $4 million worth of rent credit after 15 years. So that also has to be part of this calculation, this interest calculation, because that goes on forever, this project in Red Brook. 100 years from now, that money will come back 3 or 4 times. So we're buying down rent. So I don't think you can get any better than that when you're going after affordable housing, because it's truly about giving Mrs. Jones that rent credit so she can sell her home and enjoy the rest of her life. So that's a very important component to get out there. And in closing, that's what saved 16C. Everyone was against it in January, and it was like turning a battleship. One town meeting member wrote a letter against it. It was that information that changed it. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Al.
Thank you, Al.
Thank you, Al. Our next meeting is scheduled for August 8th, 5:30 here in this room.
Thank you.
If there's any other discussion, is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do you have to say anything?